Hey, it's Eddie, and thank you for joining me on today's episode. I apologize that I haven't gotten any videos up about the house build lately. I've taken kind of a break. I had to have some stomach surgery for diverticulitis, and I've been kind of down for about the month. I should be getting back to it soon, but I'm kind of taking it easy. But I've gotten a lot of questions lately about costs and the cost to build and how to save money, etc. So this video is going to be all about that. If you stick with me, I'll try to cover as much as I can. So the first question I get is, what is the cost per square foot to build this type of home? It's really hard to answer that question definitively because there's so many factors that come into play. Where you live, where your property is, can make a huge factor. Materials are cheaper in certain parts of the country, whereas they're more expensive than others. The cost of crews and equipment is also considerably cheaper in some parts of the country. So all of that factors in. I'm in the Los Angeles area, which is arguably one of the most expensive places to build. In fact, the permit fees to build a single family home right now are running about $50,000 in LA County or LA City. And no, you did not mishear that, $50,000. Formworks tells me that a house very similar to the design I'm doing in Topanga was recently permitted in another part of the country for less than $2,000. Now these high fees that I'm paying in LA have nothing to do with the fact that the house is unique or a dome or underground. That has no bearing. In fact, the cost is the same even for a conventional home. This is a direct result of the county basically mismanaging funds, and now they are trying to recoup that by charging huge fees for pretty much anything that you have to go to the county for. I don't want to make this whole video about all that, but because frankly it ticks me off, and it's basically legalized extortion because you have no other option. You have to go to them. But the fee schedule is outrageous, and it's solely designed for revenue gathering. So anyways, getting back to the initial question, what is the cost per square foot to build this type of home? Formworks tells me that their estimate is that it's comparable to a medium to high-end conventional home. And I think that's probably accurate. But it also brings in something else. Finishes play a big part in what your house is going to cost. The higher-end finishes are obviously going to drive the price up. Whether you've got to do a lot of excavation or a little is going to bring the cost up. Also, how much work that you're going to do yourself. So I'm going to go over some stuff that you can do to potentially save you a bunch of money. I was told recently also that the cost per square foot to build a house right now in the US is somewhere between $100 and $400 a square foot. And I've had people tell me that in LA it's now running about $400 a square foot, pretty much in anywhere in SoCal. I should be able to get this house done for under $200, which is what I did the last house for also. So the next question is, well, how do I do it and not end up, breaking my bank or spending more money than I need to? My personal recommendation would be that you act as your own general contractor. Now that doesn't mean that you have to do all of the work. In fact, you could do none of the work and still act as the general contractor and just be the guy that hires everybody to come in, and you just write checks to everybody. Obviously, the more work that you do yourself, the more money you're going to save. But backing up, so acting as your own general contractor. If you're hiring somebody to handle everything, the likelihood is you're going to pay anywhere from 25 to 50% or even more above what it would cost you to act as your own general. And that's because general contractors basically sub a lot of stuff out. They then get bills for what the subs were, then they add their percentage onto that bill and then hand it over to you. And you're basically paying them to be the guy that hires everybody and coordinates things and runs the show. If you run your own show and you act as your own general, it may end up taking a little bit longer just because, you and I, and myself included, are not experienced running a job site like this. So it may not run quite as smoothly. There may be a little bit of lag time in between each thing that's being done on the house. But acting as your own general, you can keep an eye on material costs. You can really kind of control how things are done. I would also recommend that there are certain things that you want to get a flat price on, and there's other stuff that you're going to want to get a time and materials on. When we did the underground house and I went to get bids to do this, lay the steel for the concrete in the foundation and footings, the contractor was a little concerned because he'd never dealt with a round structure and round footings. So he ended up he felt more comfortable doing it on a daily rate for his guys. And it worked out fine. They got paid for the work they did. If somebody's willing to give you a flat bid, that's fine. Just you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. The other thing I would recommend is whatever you do, you want to go out and you want to get a lot of bids, okay? Especially if you're getting a flat fee for something like, let's say, plumbing. When I went to build the Chatsworth home, I had plumbing estimates to do the rough plumbing that ranged from $7,500 up to $45,000 to do the exact same job. There was also one guy who came in at 26 grand and a whole bunch that came in at the 12 to 13 range. And obviously 26 and 45 were ridiculous, and 7,500 was too cheap, and I ended up hiring a guy in the 12 to 13,000 range. One thing you're going to have to be careful about with this house and in getting bids is that some contractors will show up, they'll look at what you've got, or they'll look at the plans and they'll think, some have even said it, oh, custom house, you must have money, and suddenly their bids get jacked up. I literally had contractors say that. I had guys drive up to look at something and go, oh, you're in a nice neighborhood and you must have a lot of money. And at that point, I was like, okay, thanks for your time. And the guy, I remember he was a Shot Creek guy, said, oh, what do you, I'll give you a competitive bid. I said, okay, great. And about an hour later, he produced a bid that was 3 times what everybody else's bid was. And if a bid seems really high, it probably is, and you should keep getting bids. And if a bid seems really low, I would be highly suspect of that, because the really low bid, the guy may not actually know what he's doing, and it's not worth it to me to save a bunch of money to end up having a job that's not done right. And by getting a lot of bids, you'll figure out where that kind of sweet spot is. When you get a bunch of bids that kind of fall into the same area and range, that's where the price should be. And I don't mind paying a fair wage to somebody to do the job. When you pay contractors, the other thing you don't want to do is never pay them up front. I've heard tons of horror stories about people paying contractors up front, or paying them the balance before the job is finished, and then the contractor disappears and they never hear from him again, and they have to hire somebody else to come in and finish the job. So you want to, in many cases, the contractor may need some money up front to pay for materials. But what I've usually done is I've paid the contractors a little bit at the end of each week so that they can pay the guys, but I never pay them the full amount until their job is finished and it's been inspected and signed off. And that prevents them from being able to, take the money and run, which happens. Okay, another big way you can save money is by doing part of the work yourself. And in that case, you need to figure out what you can realistically do, what you have the time to do, and obviously that you're healthy enough to do it. So grading tends to be really expensive where I'm at. When I did the Chatsworth home, I hired a grading contractor. I think by the time I was done, I spent about $100,000 in the grading. I did buy a small bulldozer. It's an International TD 340. It was a dozer from the 1960s, but it ran and moved dirt. And I put about 400 hours on that machine, 400 to 500 hours on that machine building the Chatsworth home. So my contractor basically said to me that I probably saved about $100 an hour by having my own machine and doing some of that work myself. Well, at 400 hours, that's $40,000. I only paid $7 grand for the machine. So the machine, as far as I'm concerned, is paid for itself. With regards to Topanga, I've put close to 300 hours on the machine now over in Topanga. So that machine has gotten a lot of use and it saved me a lot of money. Having your own equipment definitely helps. When I'm done with this job, I'll be selling that machine and I'll recoup my money on that. I also bought an excavator for the Topanga job. I bought a Drot 40, which is a 1980s machine. It's big, it's old, it's loud, it's slower than a new machine, but it gets the job done, and I'm saving a couple $100 an hour by having my own machine. I calculated it out, and I figured that the cost to rent a machine for 2 to 3 weeks was more than what I paid for the machine I bought. And for those of you who are thinking, well, I don't know how to run an excavator, I didn't know how to run an excavator either. I bought the machine, had it delivered to the property, and hopped in it. And for the first hour, it was pretty slow because I had to really think about what I was doing with the hand controls and how the machine moved. And pretty much after about an hour, it sort of became fluid, and I don't even think about it anymore. I did hire the same grading contractor at the beginning of the Topanga job because the hill was really steep and came to a sharp point. And I didn't want to try to drive a machine up there. So he drove up, kind of chopped out the top of the hill, got it level, brought it down to a certain point, and then I basically took over and bought my own machine and finished it. And I told him what I was doing, and he was totally cool with that. You know, he was happy for the work that he got, and he understood. He said, yep, you'll save yourself a ton of money. I've probably saved easily $100,000 or more by doing that with my own machine. A lot of the work I did, we did a lot of the steel for the dome. I did not do the steel for the foundation and footings. I did do the steel for the dome, and I did do the lining of the styrofoam. I had help on all that, as well as the waterproofing. Those were kind of big ticket items that I was getting high bids on, and it just made sense for me to do it. And I did hire people, and I had family and friends and others who came and helped. But that also saved me a chunk of money. So the more of that stuff that you can do, the more money that you're going to save. Shop around to get prices on materials. I've discovered where I'm at in LA, different stores have considerably different prices on certain things. So when it comes to buying like doors and windows, I'm going to go to HD Supply because the price of their doors and windows are actually better than places like Home Depot and Lowe's, and they have a bigger selection. But when it comes to things like hardware, I found a company called RJ's Construction. They've only got two stores in LA. One happens to be fairly close to my site, but their price on Simpson brackets and hardware is considerably cheaper than everyone else. I shopped around because I had to get some specialty custom brackets made through Simpson, and I think I was saving 15, 16, 17 bucks per bracket over what Home Depot wanted by special ordering them through RJ's. And I needed like 50 of these brackets. So that adds up. And when you start adding that up with everything, you can be talking tens of thousands of dollars. Formworks supplies waterproofing, but it turns out the waterproofing place that was local to me where I could buy the supplies was considerably cheaper because if I had bought it from Formworks, I had to ship it. They actually had a lower price, but the shipping costs ended up killing it for me. So I ended up buying my waterproofing locally. All that stuff is going to factor in. But the more homework that you do and the more time that you invest in planning this stuff out and shopping ahead of time and lining up places, the better you're going to be. When it comes to concrete, we have multiple different concrete companies and plants in the LA area. So I called around and found out that I could get a contractor's price because I was going to be buying a large volume of concrete from them over a period of time. And I think the going rate was like 110 yards, and I think I was getting it for like 95 because I was buying, I was buying hundreds of yards, and by the end of the job, I think I've got close to 600 yards in it. So at $15 a yard times 600, that's a chunk of change. How do you get financing to build a house like this? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how you do that because I didn't get financing to build this. I actually sold some properties I had to free up money, and so I'm basically paying cash. If you have to get financing on this, I suspect it's going to be similar to what happened when I went to get insurance on the house. Because the house is so unique, you will find that you may find lenders, like I found with the insurance company, that didn't want to insure the house because they didn't understand what it was. And the same thing will probably apply with a lender. If they don't understand it, the lender's concern is basically this: if you don't finish the house and walk off, they have to finish it in order to be able to sell it. So they have a fairly big risk. Now, the more money that you have invested in the project yourself, the less chance you are to walk off. So if you own the land outright, and let's say you've got 100 or 200, but you need another 100 or 200 to do the build, that's a much different, the bank will look at that from a much different standpoint than they would if you were coming in and wanting to basically finance the whole thing. So the more money that you can put down, so to speak, on it, the better off you're going to be. And you may have to go and sit down with a lender and really sell them on why they should finance this kind of house, especially since they've probably never seen one of these. The factors that have always changed people's opinions on these homes is when you show them finished pictures of these types of houses, which you can get through Formworks and their website and on their Facebook page. When they see pictures of how beautiful they are, when you explain the low energy use, the low cost to heat and cool, the low maintenance costs, and the fact that the house is highly resistant to most types of disasters, fires, earthquakes, mudslides, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. That's a big selling point for a bank, because if they're financing the house, you finish it, you're paying off a loan now, and then the house gets destroyed, well, obviously a house that doesn't get destroyed is a better investment. And a house that costs less to upkeep and maintain means that you have less overhead, i.e. you have more money to pay off your loan. So all of these are factors that come into play. You may have to sit down and explain this stuff to the lender because, you know, the lender doesn't understand. Most people don't understand these homes. I'll give you an example. I had a problem with my insurance company. I had got a builder's risk policy on the house. Well, the builder's risk policy lasts for a year. The insurance company sent me a letter saying they were going to cancel the policy because the year was up. So I called them up and I explained to them that I really needed them to extend it for another year, and they were hesitant. And I explained to them, I said, look, I'm not building a standard house. It's a unique house. I explained why they should, you know, continue to insure it. The risk under a builder's risk policy is the risk of fire, theft, somebody getting injured, etc. Well, I've alleviated some of these risks. So the fire risk, I've done the brush clearance. I've made sure that we don't have brush near the house. As far as theft or damage, I have somebody actually living at the site in a camper trailer. And when I explained that to my insurance company, they were like, oh, okay, you've attenuated that concern that we have. And by the time we were done with about a half-hour-long conversation, they agreed to give me another year on the policy. I also explained that I had some downtime due to some health issues, and also due to the fact that there were a couple of trips that we had previously planned that I ended up taking off, and the project got shut down for a little while. So, like anything, you may have to explain various aspects of this to the different people that you're dealing with, and that's something you're going to have to get used to doing, because you're going to have to explain it to building and safety, you're going to have to explain it to contractors, you're going to have to explain it to insurance people, and as well as lenders and money people, etc. So the more educated you are about the house, the more you can sell the merits of this house and show them examples, the better off you're going to be in being able to get what you need, i.e. an insurance policy, a loan, etc., etc. The best way I would say to do it is put yourself in their shoes and try to figure out what would their concerns be, and then figure out the answers to those, so that when they ask you a question about, well, what about this? If you've already thought about it and you have the answer, that makes them more confident in doing business with you. And that was why the insurance company agreed to give me a policy and extend my builder's risk policy for another year. I hope this video has helped. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll see if I can answer them for you. Thanks.